Well, he is so kind to join us each and every week, so let's do it right now as we bring in Dr. Richard Pan here on this Friday. Again, you can check him out each and every Friday at 8 here on The Drive. Dr. Pan, how are you?
Got disconnected.
No, we got you.
Oh.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
There you are.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, let's start with kind of a progress report. I know things change, sometimes more in a week, sometimes less. Where are we today?
Well, we are doing better, and but California is a big state, so you see variations in different parts of the state. But I think Sacramento has been recognized as the metropolitan area greater than 1 million people, but for the whole country that we have done better than anyone else. So congratulations and thank you, Sacramento. And we need to continue to move forward. We're expanding our testing. We're working on expanding our contact tracing. I think you see in the county we've a little bit of extra lifting from the health officer here in Sacramento County. And so we are making progress.
Dr. Richard Pan joining us, and so much to cover with California beginning to reopen at least a step in earnest today. When we originally met up with you and you were kind enough to join us, it was, for obvious reasons. But I think you and your colleagues are going to play a starring role in the true reopening of America and getting back to the way things were in the coming months and year-ish as we get towards a hopeful cure, as we get towards a hopeful vaccination. Again, and I go here every week, Dr. Pan is one of the world's leading brains and people of action when it comes to vaccinating our children and making people understand why that's important. Doc, do you, and I know it's repetitive, are you starting to see that coming battle for you with the anti-vax movement, with hopefully the unveiling of a vaccine? Are you starting to see those familiar to you battle lines getting drawn again?
Well, what I do see is that unfortunately we have seen there are some people who are basically opposing any effort to contain the disease. So they're the same people who protested against the vaccination bill, and they showed up at the Capitol, and then they showed up at hearings saying that not only, of course, we don't like vaccines, and there's no coronavirus vaccine, so there's no vaccine to protest right now, but they oppose the stay-at-home orders, and certainly I understand there's some people who are concerned about it because of the economic suffering that they are suffering right now. But they also oppose all the public health measures that we need to reopen safely. So they oppose contact tracing. They don't want to have people tested. And so at some point in time, you have to step back and say, okay, we have a disease. We need to, and we are, and the vast majority of people in California and across the country understand this, support this. We want to slow this disease, get hold of this disease, and then open up safely. We don't want more people getting infected. We don't want our hospitals get overrun. And so that's why we have the stay-at-home orders. That's why we have the other things. That's why we're ramping up testing. That's why we need to do contact tracing, because we need to identify who has the infection, who doesn't, and then be able to move forward in a safe way, in a way so that people feel comfortable going to work, going to shop, because our economy is not going to come back if people are afraid to do those things. And so those are very important steps. The governor laid out the parameters for California in order to do this safely, and also to basically restore public confidence in being able to go out, shop, work, other things safely. And that's what we need to continue to stay on track. So that is what we are doing. That's what we need to continue to do. We don't need a second wave. In fact, a sudden rise again in the number of cases would actually hurt our economy as well. And so we need to stay the track. But unfortunately, there are some people who, for some reason, oppose all of our public health measures and frankly, say that they want everyone to get what they call natural immunity, which is everyone getting sick. And I think that, I know that from polling that a vast majority of Californians don't want that, and they want to be safe.
Talking with Dr. Richard Pan here on The Drive. You've mentioned a couple times contact tracing, and I think that's an interesting path to follow, obviously, with what medicine's trying to do to see where it starts and what you've been in contact with. How difficult is that going to become as things are loosened up? Maybe you can, visit a shop or a place, restrictions are kind of going to that phase too. Maybe some are going back to work. How difficult does contact tracing become then?
Well, actually, what we're doing is that as we are watching the number of cases hopefully start to decline, what we've seen is hospitalizations have declined. The number of cases, basically, what you see is it's kind of leveled off, but we're also doing more testing, so we're finding more people with the tests. And I think we talked about this way back when as well. As we ramp up testing, we may see some more cases just because we're doing more testing. We weren't doing enough testing when this thing started. But what we also see is that the hospitalizations rates and death rates, and unfortunately, we've had over 2,000 people die in California, much less than the rest of the country, but still tragic to have that many people die in California of this disease. But we are doing a good job in keeping a lid on this pandemic. And when people start going back out again, we need to identify who has the disease. And so that's why testing and contact tracing is so important. Because as we're interacting more, we need to know what's going on. Without sufficient testing, without the contact tracing, it's like driving blind. You just don't know where you're going. And so that's what these things will allow us to do. It will also allow us to limit the spread of disease because we can identify who is infected and who might transmit the disease. As one of the big problems is that there are people who are asymptomatic who can transmit the disease, right? And we need to identify who those people are so that we can be sure that they're not transmitting disease to a larger number of people until they fully recover from at least the virus being in their body, even though they're not symptomatic. And so those are the things we need to do so we know what's going on, and that's how you're going to feel comfortable, right? If you're not sure when you're going about shopping or working who is infected and who isn't, and that you might get sick or you might bring a virus home to your family, to your parents or other loved ones or friends, you're going to be reasonably anxious and scared of going out, and we need to change that.
Dr. Richard Pan joining us. Doc, when we look ahead and hope for a vaccine, you're the perfect guy to ask. I'm sure you saw the story. I saw it in the LA Times. I'm sure you probably saw it before about the possible mutated COVID-19 that might explain some of the things on the East Coast. Could you just talk a little bit about the worries you may or may not have and the extra struggles if COVID-19 mutates like they're worried about? Does that present a whole different side of hurdles for an eventual cure? Well,
when it comes to the virus mutating, the question is that what's the nature of the mutation? And what appears in relation to coronavirus is that doesn't really significantly mutate in a way that that would substantially change the virus itself in a way that would make a vaccine less effective. So, for example, viruses like HIV, flu change a lot, and that's why for the flu we have to give you a new vaccine every year because there's a new strain. That's why we haven't developed a vaccine against HIV. But so far, again, this is a new virus, but so far, even though you saw some reports about, we saw some mutations, the question doesn't seem like the mutations in this virus are significant enough, particularly in relation to how infectious it is or the sort of key components of the virus, that we don't think that if you develop immunity to the virus, or if you develop a vaccine. Again, we don't have a vaccine, so it's hard to say how effective a vaccine will be until someone's invented it, that you couldn't potentially have a longer-term immunity. But we still don't know how long people are immune if they get the virus. We're not sure if when people get infected, if they mount enough of immune response, especially if they don't develop many symptoms that prevents them from being reinfected. Those are still questions that are out there. I know that people are working hard to find the answers to those questions, so we can try to figure this out. But in terms of the mutation rate of the virus, at least at this point, and again, probably need to ask a virologist who's an actual expert on viruses, but from what I've seen, I haven't heard significant concern that the mutations that people have seen in this virus create concern about developing a vaccine or in terms of immune response.
Dr. Pan, in your past experiences on vaccines, I know that seems to be the race right now to see how quickly this can be done effectively, proven and tested, and that's going to take time. Are all the people that are working on this under the same guidelines? I mean, it feels like, is there more than one way to eventually maybe kill this virus, or are they sharing notes, or people just trying to be first? Like, how does that even go in the pursuit to find this vaccine?
Well, people are sharing information. In fact, one of the challenges during the pandemic is that you see a lot of what they call preprints out there. What I mean by preprints is normally in research what happens is that you do your research study, you publish it in a journal. What that requires is you send a manuscript, they have people review it, etc. But in order to try to move information as quickly as possible, a lot of research is being put out without having had a thorough review yet. So now, it eventually will, but that becomes a challenge because we're trying to get information out as quickly as possible between scientists, but also other people pick up on it, and sometimes people overinterpret or misinterpret those findings, and and eventually people find out there's certain flaws or limitations to those findings, and so that makes it challenging, especially as we're trying to get people accurate information, and that's why oftentimes there's a lot of I don't knows. You'll see things like, well, we think it's this way. We need to do more research, and so, for example, we just talked about the mutation issue, right? And so there are papers out talking about how the virus and how it changes and so forth, and I think there's some of this is more along the lines of, okay, that's interesting, but what does that mean? We still don't know, right? I mean, people want to have answers, and people are trying to get answers, but just realize there's still a lot of I don't knows, because even when someone does a research that, oh, well, we found X, it may be a very small study, it turns out it's a biased population, there's a bunch of other things, it still provides some useful information, but the utility of that information or usefulness of that information may be fairly limited until people do larger studies or further investigate it. And so that's a constant challenge. So when you talk about vaccines, there's a lot of different vaccine candidates they're looking at, right? So you have a virus, they're looking at, okay, well, can we look at how people respond to a protein on the virus, like those little hook proteins, the spikes on can we make a virus against the RNA or the genetic material in the virus, right? Maybe that can be a target. Maybe there's another protein on the virus. So people are looking at a whole variety of different things and then trying to figure out, well, which part of the virus, because after all, a vaccine is essentially giving a part of the virus or something enough to stimulate the immune system without getting you sick, right? So the question is, which part of the virus would create the best immune response to ensure that if you were actually exposed to the real virus, you would avoid getting sick. And so that's what essentially they're trying to figure out, and it's about efficacy, but it's also about safety as well. And I think that's very important. That's part of the reason why it's going to take us at least 18 months to get a vaccine. As hard as everyone's working, is because even if someone invented what would eventually be the vaccine, suppose someone already came up with it right now, but we wouldn't know it's the vaccine until they do the efficacy studies to be sure it's effective, and then also the safety studies to be sure it's safe. And but the reality is that we'll probably have several vaccine candidates. Hopefully that will be promising, but it will take time to firmly establish how effective it is and how safe it is, and it certainly wouldn't be approved until it's proven to both be safe and effective, and that does take time, even when you try to do it as quickly as possible.
Dr. Pan, don't you worry, though, and maybe somewhere actually believe, because you also are in politics, that everything you're saying obviously is 1,000,000,000% correct when it comes to the 18 months, but with a lifetime's worth of work in trying to educate people on the safety and advantages of vaccines, you've been dealing with ones that have been reviewed, that have been tested, that have been, vetted. Don't you do you deep down think that when we look at what's happening with the economy, when we look at psychologically the fact that this economy is probably not coming back until people are comfortable going out, do you worry and believe that there's no chance that's going to be an 18-month test, that with the nature of politics and the nature of the economy and where we're at, that odds are when and if that vaccine is found, it's going to get rushed to market, and a lot of the normal hurdles and normal safeguards are either going to be ignored or maybe pushed aside? Is that a worry you have?
I don't think so, because the reason is that we're not going to put out a vaccine for widespread, public use en masse until it's demonstrated safe and effective. And basically what we're first going to need to do is our public health measures, right? And that's going to allow us over time to open up more and more of our economy. When it comes to the vaccine, having a vaccine that's pushed out too early, unfortunately, would actually create a backlash that would set us back, and I think most people are conscious of that. What I'm more concerned about is that we have people out there who are criticizing a non-existent vaccine, who are basically saying, oh, the vaccine definitely won't be safe, except there's no vaccine. So how can you say it's not going to be safe when it doesn't exist yet, right? So we do have people out there spreading disinformation about vaccines that are already proclaiming a non-existent vaccine as being unsafe when there is no approved vaccine. And interesting enough, the same people who are saying that no vaccine against this virus would be safe and are also saying that they don't want testing and contact tracing either. And so where does that leave us? And yet they're also saying that we should also lift our stay-at-home orders, which means that essentially what they're saying is that we want everyone to get sick. And that's not the solution either. If you look at what's happened at New York City, thinking about all the deaths there, I think over 20,000 over New York, and when they did the serology testing, again, there were some limitations to their testing. Even with all the cases they had there, they are nowhere near community immunity. I think they assessed about 20% of the people probably have been affected based on their serology. That's probably less than a third of the way there. And imagine tripling the number of deaths. And we have to say to ourselves, is that something that is acceptable? I think for most people, the answer is no. All right, we don't want large numbers of people to get sick and die in the path of trying to address this disease, and that certainly is not going to help the economy as well to see that many people die. And so that's why we need to continue to focus on our public health measures, like, as I mentioned, it's the testing, expanding the testing, doing the contact tracing, being sure we have isolation in place so that we can identify who has the disease and be sure they're not spreading it. And then ultimately, yes, we need to continue to work toward an effective and safe vaccine, and that's so we can try to further basically lift basically lift the restrictions. And frankly, the bottom line is have people feel confident and comfortable that when they are engaging in a variety of activities that they are safe.
Well, we know there's more work to do. Dr. Pan, thank you so much for giving us more insight today. We look forward to it next Friday. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, thank you so very much.